Hello and welcome to week 6 of animal drawing. This week we're going to be discussing reptiles, fish, and sharks. We'll also be discussing rendering. During this video, I highly recommend taking notes. There's a lot we're going to go over. Let's take a look at the ray-finned fish skeleton, and this is a yellow perch. It has the skull right in here, gill covers right there, eye socket or orbit, upper and lower jaw. And you'll see here's the pectoral girdle. It's the pec fin, the pectoral fin, and then you have the pelvic girdle right in here, and that's the pelvic fin. You then have a lot of ribs. If you've eaten fish, you are probably familiar with getting some ribs. And of course, the backbone moving all the way back to the tail. Next up are the muscles. Rather simple compared to the quadrupeds we've been working on for the past 5 weeks. You have the cheek area, the levator and abductor muscles right here. This is actually edible on a fish. The horizontal septum moving down, middle of that fish, and you can see that it splits the epaxial muscles on top and the hypaxial muscles on the bottom. Note that these muscles have a zigzag motion to it. On some fish, such as a channel catfish, you can see the muscle on the top of the skin. It's quite clear, especially on a fish like that with smooth skin. Here I just took a section, say midsection of the fish with the guts lying in here, and you can see here the epaxial on top and the hypaxial on the bottom. Kind of reminds you a little bit of sushi. For the external anatomy of the fish, you have the gill covers, the operculum, covering the gills, protecting them. On a shark, you have gill slits. You have the nostrils up here on the top of the head. Moving down to the branchiostical rays, they are supporting the gill membrane, which lies underneath the operculum, right in here. Moving all the way to the back, you see this nice line. Starting from the back of the head all the way to the tail, that is the lateral line. And it picks up on those good vibrations in the water. It also is great picking up on vibrations for prey animals that they are emitting in the water. Say an insect or a minnow that is hurt. The fins, you have a spiny first dorsal fin on the perch here. And you have a second dorsal fin which is soft rayed. The spiny fins move up and down. The soft fin rays are able to move in a way like a piece of paper. Very flexible, those soft fin rays are. Pectoral fin, you have the pelvic fin. You can see there's a spine on that guy. Be careful when you pick this fish up. He'll definitely get you with that. Next is the anal fin. Again, there are 2 spines on that. Right in here, you have the peduncle. And that is area between the body, pretty much, and the tail. This is going to come up in the demo, so keep an eye out for this guy. And the last one is the tail or the caudal fin. Various shapes, and in the caudal fin, in sharks and fish, you get all sorts of shapes. And again, in the dorsal fin. So I will go over that when I start demoing. The mouth structure of the fish, again, determines what it is built for. You have form follows function. This is a tarpon, very popular sports fish. They can fight, and it has a superior mouth. You'll notice it kind of has a smile to it. Pike, tarpon, you think of predatory fish, and actually the flathead catfish have a superior mouth structure. Able to pick off what's on the top of the water. You have the inferior mouth structure on the channel catfish here, and that's a fish able to pick off what is on the bottom of the pond, the ocean, the lake, whatever, wherever it lives. Now, carp have this, and those suckerfish have it. You have the terminal mouth structure. This is a brown trout, and it is very even. The mouth structure is here. Predatory fish, the brown trout is. And you have here long-nosed gar, pretty much giving away the elongated mouth structure. Fluke fish have this. You can see the gar have it as well. Down here you have a parrotfish and a pufferfish. They have a beak mouth. They're able to scrape off food from rocks. They're able to break open mussels and like shells. Alright, a really quick demonstration of how I approach cross-hatching. I'll start over again, you'll see there. I'm going to start out with a basic cylinder, and just see I'm going to place some cross-hatching on the cylinder here. I'm going to start out with the shadow shape first, and then I go in and start placing the cross-hatching in the direction of the form. To create a little bit darker effect, I use the cross-hatching where the core shadow is. Using basic shapes just to practice cross-hatching and directional mark making is fantastic before jumping into an animal. Give you just a little bit more practice and control also over your cross-hatching when you want to work with it. Right here is just this is going to be an incredibly simple fish. And I'm going to go in and find the head. I'm thinking about a catfish shark thing. I have no idea. Really just breaking down this thing into basic shapes, thinking about plane changes, like the top of the head there. Right here I'm just going to go and place quick cross-hatching throughout the body. And I'm thinking of light hitting it on the top. Get a bit darker. There's the gill. There's the fin right there. Now here I'm going to place in that light. You'll see. And there's going to be a little bit of cast shadow from the dorsal fin. Get some of that cross-hatching in there. And pull that back. And then get that tail in. And I'm thinking also of the direction of those rayed fins when I'm doing this. Darkening up some areas to clarify them, and also lightening up areas because of the light hitting on the top of the surface. I don't want a thick line up there. It's going to look like a coloring book. Place in some more fins. Get a little bit more cross-hatching, directional mark making in there. So with a fish, essentially you can work with a cone and a cylinder. It's pretty easy actually. I'll sketch a channel catfish here. One, because this catfish, the catfish doesn't have scales, and I want to break it down first into the gestural, getting in the fins. There's an anal fin, nice forked tail, nice big forked tail there, and quite a flat head on these guys with the barbels, pretty much the catfish whiskers. And there you have that kind of flat head there. This is a bottom feeding fish. Can also be a predator as well. Get that eye in there. Yeah. Draw a cross also for that eye. Even on the fish, again, this is a bony fish. You can think about the skull to help guide you. Do a little sketch up there on that skull. See where the eye is and where that cheekbone is as well. And again, that eye is inside of that skull. It's not floating on the outside. So just be careful not to draw your fish like that. Pull in the muscles back there. On that back side, get in that bottom lip. And the gills, the operculum. Pull in those barbels at the bottom. Start thinking about the construction of this catfish. So what I noticed is that I was focusing on the head and I was thinking about the bulk of the head, and the body got a little bit too small. So I'm just going to go in and pull, increase the size of that body really quick. Again, keeping it very loose, very gestural. Get those fins in there. Think about drawing through. Get that belly in there as well. Some fish I've caught have really just full bellies of crawdads and dead fish and stuff. It's really quite amazing how fat their bellies can get. There's a huge anal fin on this guy as well. You can see down there. Thinking again about that face. I don't want to make it too human. I'm really careful with the eyes when I draw fish. Get that barbel down there. Open up the mouth a little bit. And again, focusing on those eyes. Again, drawing all the dogs and cats with the emotions. You're coming to an animal that actually doesn't have many muscles in the face, so you're not going to get a lot of facial expressions like the dog or the cat. Alright, so I'm going to go in now and start constructing. I'm going to start out with that dorsal fin. On catfish, the dorsal fin and the pectoral fin have spines, and they actually do have poison in them. It hurts really bad when they nick you. Especially the younger ones. If they nick you, you'll feel it for about 3 days with that dorsal fin or the pectoral fin. So again, drawing the head, and I'm looking at the skull up there of the catfish to help guide me with this. Again, very hard area on a fish, and I'm drawing through. Thinking about that eye again and that little cheek back there, little cheekbone, and then placing in the barbels, even drawing those on the head. Getting the operculum in there as well, nice and hard, again covering the gills, protecting them. And placing a little bit of information where that pectoral fin is. As you can see, I drew a cylinder. So then it feels like that fin is really on the side of that fish's body, so it's just floating. A little bit more information on the operculum. And then there's that bony spine that comes down from that pectoral fin. I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to think about this fish as being a little bit older. Eyes are a little bit smaller, the head's a little bit squat. And there's that lateral line. Right in there, pulling back. And that little fin on the back side, that's the adipose fin, and trout have that as well. Nice big anal fin back there. Pull that down. And think about the area between the adipose and anal fin, and of course the caudal fin, where the peduncle lies. It's a nice space in between there. Getting a little bit of those whiskers in there, having fun with that. And placing that pelvic fin right down there. Zoom out, and what I noticed when I zoomed out, I'm gonna place the dorsal fin back a little bit. I didn't want it too near the head, too close to the head. And then I'm gonna jump around, think about the belly. Right there. Get those fins in order as well. And here I'm going to start thinking about some construction. And there's my light source right above that fish. I'm not going in worrying about water and the effect of water at the moment. I just want to go in and get those nice basic shapes and get some shadow and more form to this drawing. A lot more information to that. Start out with that dorsal fin. Make sure that it's not just kind of floating on there. You'll see what I did with that ray fin on this fish. It's kind of turning away. Again, ray fins are very flexible. Spines, the fins with the spines move in an up and down direction. So I'm going to go in and start talking more about the form. As you can see, I started with big shapes, thinking about the entire drawing first, and then going in and starting to pull in the more specific areas. Pelvic fin right there. See that nice V shape in between that fin. Pulling a nice big shadow right there behind the belly. And again, think of that dorsal fin turning a little bit, nice and flexible. I really like the movement of that. Again, I think about a piece of paper, very fluid. So back to the eye. And what I'm going to do here is just sketch out the eye. Think of a cylinder shape for the eye. Don't just draw it flat. I'm just going to sketch it up there at the top where the skull is. Don't just draw it flat. And the pupil on the catfish is actually a slit pupil. And when drawing other fish's pupil, look at the shape. It usually is asymmetrical. Just the tip there for fish eyes, so things don't look, you don't just put a person's eyeball on a fish. It's not creature design right here. So again, back to that face, thinking about the barbel, where the nares are, the nose. Thinking also about the shape of that pupil. Again, just making sure that it is really attaching to the head inside the skull. It is mobile, they're able to look around. There we go, looking a little bitter there. And what I'm going to do is flip it and just check it. That looks fine. The thing about flipping your canvas, do it often, because you can see a lot of mistakes, especially when you're working with your construction. Maybe a line's off, maybe the eyeball on one side is falling to one side, and you don't want it that way. Going back to the operculum, I'm going to darken it up, get the gill membrane in there, or the branchiostegel. Thinking again about that light source. Nice barbel in there, getting those whiskers nice and dark, coming forward. Zoom in and zoom out. It's a good habit to get into, so you're not getting caught in just one area. There's the pec fin right there. Making sure I get those rays on that. Having fun with this. And again, fish, getting those plane changes, the subtle ones in fish is quite easy. Again, you think about nice basic shape. If you are into eating fish and you like to purchase it, think about a fish cutlet for the shape of the body. The heads differ from the fish. Again, what is their purpose? What are they hunting? And also the fins and the tail. So fish, a lot of different shapes and sizes on these animals. Really fun to draw. But initially you're working with some cylinders, you're working with cones and all of those basic shapes. And all I'm doing with the cross-hatching here is just adding a little bit more information on what is happening with the form. Using that photo reference at the top is very helpful. I also have photo references on my other screen while I work from work with this particular fish. So I'm not just drawing out of my head. And that really helps. Just use photograph references. Don't copy straight out of them, but use them. Pull a little bit darker area behind that cheek and the operculum there. And just jumping around, pulling in the hatching and cross-hatching. As you see, I'm focusing a lot on the head right now. And up here, on channel cats, especially young ones, they have these nice big spots. And when I draw patterns on any animal, I'm thinking again about the form. So you have the cylinder shape right there. And I draw the patterns with the form. There's no real pattern I stick to with catfish. It's kind of random. And when they get older, they lose their spots. The younger ones, beautiful. Sometimes they're just dark because they have so many little spots on them. You can see I'm starting to place in a little bit of different the hatching near the belly. Nice, thinking about a nice thick belly on this guy. Pull back that adipose fin. Just think a little bit before I go into the fins here. I'm actually pulling the fins out, kind of creating imperfections, because again, the older the fish, the more imperfections. Sometimes they'll actually be missing barbels, the whiskers, and fins. They're tough. They're tough animals. Jumping around again. And at this point with the hatching and cross hatching, as soon as I figure out the light source and the overall feel for the shadows, I allow myself to jump around. And for this, again, this demo, I'm focusing a lot on the head and the structure of the head. Got a big old fat carp here, and I'm gonna place in these diagonal lines. And you can see there, the scales on this carp have a nice pattern to them. And even crossing, you can see there's a nice pattern to the scales with the other diagonal. And with that in mind, I'm gonna sketch a quick profile of just a carp body. Again, I'm think about that nice cylinder-like shape, fish cutlet shape, I should say. Get that nice body in there of the carp. Again, I'm thinking of that cylinder, nice and thin. The carp I'm drawing is not as fat, unfortunately. There's my shadow, thinking of the 3D axis as well. So back to my carp fillet right here. And right in here, I'm going to start out with those nice diagonal lines crossing each other. And you see I'm drawing with the form. Pulling that pectoral fin as well. And the operculum, or just the gill slit right there. And then place in the other diagonal. Again, this is just a profile view. But what I'm doing is just drawing out these diamond shapes, again, moving with the direction of the form. And there I can find the scale pattern on the carp here. And I chose the carp because the scales are very clear. What I'm going to do now is add a little bit more information. As you can see, when that carp, when its body and the scales move up towards the dorsal fin, I'm going to lose information because these scales are moving with the form. And right in the middle of this carp's body, I'm going to sketch in more information. I can really go in and have some fun with the detail of the scales. I'm not going to go in with every single scale. And this also, the diagonal lines allow you not to just draw one single scale after the other. You can get the entire fish's body or choose a few areas you want to talk about or draw on a very scaly fish. So then placing in more information, getting that pec fin in there as well. I'm going to place that dorsal fin as well. Zoom out just so I don't get caught up in too much detail. And there where the belly turns on my sketch on the carp, I'm going to lose information. You can see that also where the belly is getting lighter and the top of the fish is getting darker. And again, above, on top of the fish, I'm not going to go in and draw all the detail. If you draw all the scales, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're really going in for an anatomically correct drawing or a scientifically correct, that's one thing. But remember, if you draw all the scales with the same line thickness, it really flattens out the drawing. So be very careful. Remember that when the body is turning, when that form is turning, I'm going to start losing those lines where those scales really come together. It's just a quick tip. So here I'm going to draw a fish steak or a fish cutlet, and I'm just kind of thinking about a random just a random cutlet. Go back into that carp really quick, and I'm going to smooth out those edges a little bit because the cycloid scales on the carp are nice and round. I really like that about the carp scales. They're very big and pretty. They're very pretty. So here I'm going to go in with my fish cutlet and again placing the diagonals. And as you can see, when that fish, that body moves back into space, those diagonals, of course, move with the perspective. Right in there. And another thing I'm thinking about is how the information of those scales, when the body's coming forward, I'm going to have more information. And when the body of the fish is moving away, I'm going to have less information. So I'm not going to go in and, again, draw all the scales in the same line weight. That'll flatten out my image. Moving with the form while I'm placing in my cross hatching here. That nice dark area above, thinking about that. And you get kind of in a rhythm with scales. It's quite nice. It can be really relaxing to draw and really go in and get that detail. But again, this isn't a scientific illustration course. You don't have to count all the scales or find out how many scales are on a fish. Again, if you really want to, go ahead, but it's not necessary. So there we go. You can see how the information of those scales is just enough to talk about that nice pattern and also the shape of those scales. I'm thinking again of the cycloid scales like on a carp. So I'm going to darken up some areas that are coming forward right in here. Giving my fish cutlet nice and tasty looking almost. Put some wine on it and a little butter, fry it up. So back to the carp scales, again moving with the direction of the form. Alright, I'm going to sketch some fish so you can see differences in shape. And again, I'm going to start out with a common carp. Get that nice big shape in there. Again, this one's going to be fat, so I'm pretty excited. I like drawing big old chunky fish. Big boy right here. Get that dorsal fin. Think about that nice sucking mouth, bottom feeder. This guy is. Getting those gills in there. The operculum. Now think about a little beady eye for this guy. He's a big old fat dude, and I want him to have little beady eyes. Same with the catfish when the fish gets older, and just like people. Now you got cute little fish with those big eyes, and then you get an old fish with little beady looking eyes like this guy. Get that barbel, and again that sucking mouth, that sucker mouth in there. Now here I'm going to pull the section of the body back just because it was getting a little bit too squashed there. Placing that pelvic fin a little bit closer. The peduncle, nice and clear, nice big forked tail again on this fish. Think about the placement of that anal fin. It's right after pretty much where the fish gets rid of its waste, the gut region. That pec fin right in there, right after the operculum. Fix that eye up a little bit. I'm going to pull it forward just a little bit. Make sure there's a nice area between the muscles of the back and the head. They get this kind of hunchback when they get nice and big like this, and I want to really capture that. Again, the head made out of bone, and then pulling back that muscle right after it really makes it look a lot older, a lot bigger. Here we're going to place the diagonal lines, get that nice pattern going on, and feel for also the belly on this fish. I'll put that eye up just a tiny bit more. Think about that lateral line. Just jump around and get some more information in the sketch, darken some areas up. Make sure the fins are nice and clear. And back to the scales. Now, like I said before, the carp have a scale called the cycloid scale. Nice and big, and round, and very round in shape. So I'm pulling a little bit more information in the scales of the fish again. Again, even at a profile, I'm going to be drawing with the form on this guy. A little bit of that cheek in there on that fish as well. So it doesn't feel like the eye is just placed on the head. It feels like it's in the skull, just like all the animals we have been working with so far. And back to the scales. Just think for a second about what I'm about to do. Getting in a rhythm with the scales and also the rendering of this carp. So up here I'm going to sketch out just the basic shape of that carp scale. You can see it's very round. And then it of course extends back to where it is placed into the body of that fish. Nice armor protection. There is a species of carp known as the glass carp where it doesn't have or has very little scales on it. And you can draw one of those. Those are really interesting looking. The monks actually bred them here in Europe because they're easier to fillet. Some more information in the head. As you can see, again, I'm losing information when the scales are moving up towards the back and the belly. Not interested in drawing every single scale. It's just enough to talk about the pattern and the feel for the texture of this fish. Nice shadow underneath the gill right there. Having a fun time with that. And of course getting those ray fins in there as well. So I'm going to pull the carp up and start out with another fish. This is going to be the long-nosed gar. And I really like the shape of this fish. Very long, actually. They have an incredibly cool looking skull, almost crocodile-like. And of course incredibly bony, so I want to make sure I get the plane changes. Again, thinking about the hard surface of the skull on the fish here. And they have a very elongated snout. Make sure it's nice and thin as I'm going to push that eye back away from where the jaw articulates, where it opens. Get that eye in there. Again, I don't want to think about a human pupil. I want to think about a fish-shaped pupil. Again, typically asymmetrical in shape. Here we have the pec fin. Get that head nice and clear. You see on this fish is very long and it's got different fins going on compared to the perch and also the carp up there. You have the pelvic fin a little farther back. There's that nice lateral line. Thinking about a little bit of the patterns going on this fish. I'm going to pull back the dorsal fin on the top side there, and then the anal fin right in here. Of course, with that, I want to think again about the peduncle. Let's move this guy over a little bit before I start on that. There's the caudal fin, the fin there. It's nice and flat looking. Got the carp with the forked tail and the flat looking caudal fin of the gar here. Get that operculum nice and dark and clear. inspired me. I'm working on that tail fin of the gar to place a little bit of information on the carp up there. So, gar. Again, I'm going to start out with the scale pattern again, thinking of the diagonals. Nice diamond shape right there on this fish. And move those diagonals back. Again, thinking about the form of this fish. I'm thinking about fish fillet, I'm thinking about fish steak, fish cutlet, a nice cylinder shape, and drawing on that surface. So here I'm going to pull back that scale pattern. And on the gar, they have a ganoid scale. It's pretty much a diamond shape. So diamonds are a gar's best friend, I guess. And you get these on sturgeon and paddlefish. The cycloid scale on the carp you will find on soft-finned rayed fish like salmon and trout. So I'm going to really pull back. Make sure the beginning of the scale pattern is a little bit smaller when I'm moving to the body. I'm going to enlarge it just a little bit. We've got some little nice dark spots on the snout there I want to capture. And also into the gills, these spots. Pulling in the dark side of the gar up there on top. Thinking about some spots also in those fins in the back. Like jumping around with those spots. Again, drawing with the form, thinking about the form when I draw patterns. Not just randomly placing and making it look flat. Sometimes when you're drawing patterns on an animal and you miss the form, it's going to actually flatten out those basic shapes. So do be careful of that. Getting some nice information on the fin right there. Again, thinking about spots in that caudal fin. And also on the body. Really darkening this fish up. Especially on that top side. Nice spot there on the anal fin. So I'm going to pull this down, the carp and the gar. And I'm going to draw this little fish called a goby. And I believe when I was growing up, we used to call them Mad Jacks. Something like that. They lived in the trout stream we used to fish in. But these guys, you'll notice the eyes are incredibly high up on the head, almost frog-like. And again, I wanted to draw 3 different fish with very different shapes. So here, again, I'm thinking about the fins, dorsal and anal. Nice and long anal fin on this guy, very long. I'm going to pull in the first dorsal fin, which is actually spiny. And now back to the eyes, right up in there. And place that nice pupil in there. Again, not thinking a round shape, getting that nice asymmetrical shape in the eye. They've got relatively big fish lips and cheeks as well. I quite like the shape of these little guys. Place on the belly there. Get that pec fin. And you'll notice the pelvic fin is very close to the pectoral fin. Very, very close. Get that peduncle in there. We're going to place in the spiny fin at the top and back to the caudal fin there. Get that nice round, flat shape of that fin. Look at all those shape variations on these animals. They're great. It's just great. These guys, they swim on the bottom and they like to live in between rocks. And they're relatively small fish. It's they'll steal your bait. I remember them just stealing a lot of my bait when I was fishing. Anyway, back to the gills. The operculum there. That nice back in there. There's that lateral line again. I like thinking about that. And you see how nice and big that pectoral fin is on this fish. Pulling some rays on the anal and the second dorsal fin. And then that mouth, really open that mouth up. Again, you can see very, very fishy looking lips on this goby, this round goby I'm drawing. Get that nice gill membrane in there. It's nice and clear on this fish. They've got a very pointed looking operculum, especially compared to the gar and the carp. It's nice to keep in mind. Some fish, like the bluegill, have an extension on the operculum. It makes it look like an eye. So that's something to keep in mind as well. I'm going to start placing a little bit of scale pattern, and I'm going to mix it up with the pattern on this fish, the round goby. The scales on this particular fish are quite small, especially compared to the carp and the gar. Gar scales have actually been found fossilized. They're really hardy scales. Get those rays in there, and they have these spots on that first dorsal fin. Actually, I was looking at that and reading about it. So here, the scale on the goby is it's called a ctenoid, and it's actually very similar to the cycloid scale of the carp. And you'll see here I'm going to draw a little bit these teeth on the end of that scale, and they're very textured, very, very textured. The carp are very smooth. And goby, if you pick them up or perch like fish with the ctenoid scales, they feel really sandpapery. So right here, I'm just going to place this in. The pelvic fin of this fish, the goby, actually is scallop shape and is fused. It's kind of a neat thing, and I wanted to show you that. Just the bottom view of this fish. I'm going to start out with sketching a mako shark, a short-finned mako. I really love the shape of these animals. I am a big fan of sharks. I think they're gorgeous and they're very elegant in the water. So essentially for a shark, I'm just going to start out with a cylinder cone-like shape, and I'm going to quarter this guy towards a little bit. Place in the dorsal fin, the first one there, and I'm going to draw through. I'm going to start thinking about drawing through even with my sketch right here. So makos are incredibly fast sharks. If you'll notice, the caudal fin, the tail fin, the upper and lower lobes are the same length, and their caudal fin is actually very similar to the prey, which they enjoy eating, the tuna. So that's a kind of a funny thing there. Started with the head. I'm going to think about that eye placement, and you'll see here how I split where those gill slits are going to be placed before the pectoral fin, and how I construct that part in the head. It's very different from the body. Very similar to the fish. I'm going to think about it being bony. Yes, these are cartilaginous fish, but their head structure is still very hard. more of those fins in there and darken that up. Kind of jump around right back in here. I'm going to start thinking about the placement of the pelvic fin and the anal fin as well. Just kind of jump around there. Think about that nice long pec fin on the other side. I'm kind of having fun there. I want to make sure that it looks nice and three-dimensional. I'm going to pull in the mouth. Get a nice dark eye on this fish, on this shark. There's that lateral line moving back all the way to the tail. Really extend that mouth back behind the eye. And this shark, I'm gonna count the gill slits really quick. It's got 5, nice and dark right in there. And sharks, normally you get 5 gill slits. They're of course like the 7-gilled shark with 7 gills or gill slits. Just to keep that in mind. That nice head in there. I'm thinking very, again, angular. They're very hydrodynamic looking, very sleek looking, but I'm still thinking, especially in the face, very hard and very angular. Pull down the opacity and get some of that construction going on here. Gonna round off where those gill slits begin in the head. Differentiate that with the body there. And think about a nice, sleek, an angular head. I'll pull that nose out a little bit more. This guy's got a nice long pointy nose, the short fin mako does. Pull that mouth down. A nice angle on that mouth. And think about those gill slits. And also kind of a lobe-like shape where those gill slits lie. A nice dark eye. I really want to get that shape of the eye. I don't want it to look sad. I don't want it to look silly. I want it to look very shark-like. So again, I'm using photograph references, some really good close-ups of heads of the short fin mako so I can capture that shape. Get that nice long lateral line back there, and I'm going to pull in this kind of strange shape behind the anal fin and the second dorsal fin. I'll go into that a little bit later. Make sure I draw through for that pectoral fin. Getting it really stuck on the side of the body. And drawing through, thinking of the ellipse. Right in here, I'm going to place that pec fin down just a tiny bit. There's that pelvic fin. And that nice caudal fin. Again, very symmetrical looking. Very similar. The upper and lower lobe is. Make sure it's a little bit shorter. This is the short fin mako, so I want to make sure I get that in my sketch. Little point, little arrow point at the top of that fin. Pull that out a little bit. Now here I'm going to start going in and pulling in the little bit of the cross hatching. Open up that mouth. Make sure where the bone lies, the mouth structure and the nose, get a nice angle between that area. And I'm pulling that tail again. I didn't particularly like that. There we go. And add a little bit of directional mark making, even to the caudal fin back there. Now I'm going to place in these things. You'll notice that on some sharks they're called claspers. This is actually on male sharks, so I'm going to extend that back. So I'm drawing a he actually. Pulling those nice gill slits and pulling some nice shadow underneath those gill slits. Again, I'm not just drawing one straight line down that's symmetrical. I'm going in and thinking about how to make it asymmetrical and also move with the form, the gill slits. Pulling some directional mark making. Nice dorsal fin right there. First one. That nice black eye. And really darkening up that eye will make me push the darks in my sketch. So now I'm going to go in and really define that mouth structure. Now that I have pretty much the darkest dark in my sketch. Think about your darkest dark and your lightest light when you're sketching and doing cross-hatching. It really helps. And that face, I really want attention drawn to that face, so I'm going to spend a little extra time on it to get those nice shapes in there. The nice mouth structure. Think about the jaw, the bony jaw inside of the shark, and the mouth. And those subtle form changes on the shark's face. Put some nice shadow there. I want to catch that directional mark making again. Okay. Jumping back to that face, making sure it's nice and clear. The belly. And again, at this stage, I'm really just jumping around and pulling in information. But I know that the area in which I want the viewer to focus on is the face. So I want that to be nice and clear. Start darkening up the head there. Make sure that the head is nice and big. Zoom in and just double check, especially that eye. I'm going to really make sure that eye is nice and clear. I'm going to indicate a little bit of the teeth here. They got nice crooked teeth, very curved teeth, the short-finned mako does. And I'll sketch that out later so you can see. So what I'm going to do here is just quickly sketch in. Well, first I'm going to jump up to the head and decide that I want to pull in a little bit more detail on the body before going into this demonstration. And here, this is called the keel of the shark. And this helps sharks turn. You'll notice on the white shark, or the great white shark, they have a keel, and also on whale sharks. So do keep this in mind. On smaller sharks, such as the blacktip reef shark, you'll typically find those in aquariums and zoos and in aquarium parks. They don't usually have the keel. So just keep that in mind. And on the mako here, they do have the keel. It's very thick near that caudal fin, before the caudal fin, I should say. Make sure that mouth doesn't end up looking too flat or too sad. The thing is with the mouth, be very careful not to add too much shadow to it, because it can get really flat and kind of sad looking very quickly, especially on fish and sharks. More information in the back there with the caudal fin. And just jumping around. I'm pretty happy with the head of the shark right here, with the shadows and the definition in which I've put into the drawing. I'm going to pull off the sketch and see how that looks without it. Help me lighten up some areas. sure there's a nice light area on the dorsal fin, one up there. And just jump around the body with the cross-hatching. Again, you find a rhythm to this when you're working with the cross-hatching. Turn on some music and have fun with it. I'm going to continue with the short-finned mako and sketch a quick head here, just the head, thinking about that pointed nasal area. Nice dark eye and the location of that eye, and the cartilaginous, or pretty much the skull structure underneath the shark. And if that of course will help influence the surface form. Get that eye in there. Really think about that shape. And the mouth structure right here. Think about those gill slits as well. And there is the nares, or one of the nasal openings on the shark. And of course around the eye, just like a fish, you have the hard structure, so I want to indicate that. Make sure that's nice and clear on this head sketch. Of course, the directional mark making around the eye really helps. It helps make it feel like it's in the head, in the skull. Get that nice dark eye in there. Really, really like that about these sharks. Pulling the mouth back to the nose and down to the throat region. A little bit of those teeth in there. I'm going to move these back just a little bit, the sketches here. I'm going to go in and I'm going to sketch the mako, and it's in a biting pose, a biting action. So I'm going to think about the mouth opening. It's going to look a little silly at first. I'll start out with simple shapes, but here's the snout. As you can see, it lifts up and the bottom jaw drops right there. So what I'm going to do is think about the bony structure of the jaw just as a basic shape, and how that attaches into the mouth of this shark. Get that eye in there. And also where the articulation is of the shark, I'm going to move it down, open it up, to get a little bit more dynamic in this sketch. Add a little bit of teeth. And darken up that eye as well. So what I'm going to do is just copy and paste. And when the shark bites like this, it actually thrusts, the jaw detaches from the rest of the skull. It thrusts forward for an extra, pretty much extension of the jaw. I really wouldn't want to be grabbed by it. And while that is happening, you have the eye, which has a nictitating lid, which is pretty much a blinking, it's blinking. It's actually protecting the eye when it's about to bite like this. And you can see there with the arrow, looks like it's about to chomp on that guy, but the arrow indicating that there's a thrust forward of the jaw there, again thrusting away from the rest of the skull, so that's nice and clear. And you'll see that on slow motion films with sharks. It's quite intense to watch. So with that, I'm going to move this over. and just sketch a quick mako shark tooth. It's kind of nice to go in and study these just little details like this on sharks, and you can see how jagged it looks and pointed as well. It has a very pointed point to it pretty much. So they're going to just go in and get a little bit of the serration on the side there. And even when sketching a tooth like this, I draw through. It's just, again, it's a nice study, and do look at the shapes of shark teeth so you can see the differences between, especially the white shark, makos, or even like sand sharks or horn sharks. So here I'm going to go in and place, just sketch again over the basic shapes of the shark. I just took my sketch of the mako, and I'm again just going to go in and indicate areas that are important. Here's the separation of the gill slits and the skull, pulling even the lateral line in and drawing through, thinking of that nice cone cylinder shape of this shark's body. Get that nice pectoral fin in there. Again, drawing through, making sure that it is fitting on the side of that cone shape. Getting that head in there. Again, thinking again about that nice hard structure of the jaw of this shark. There's that nice tuna shaped caudal fin of the short fin mako. Get in that pelvic fin right there. Again, drawing it on the body of the shark. You can see I don't start out with the fins. I really start out with that initial gestural, thinking of the lateral line, and then get the shape of the shark. Again, this is a high-speed animal, unlike the whale shark, which is a filter feeder. Very different shapes among sharks, so do look at that when drawing them. Speaking of shapes of different sharks, I'm going to sketch a cool shark in here. It's called the thresher shark, and they have a massive upper lobe on the caudal fin. Very distinctive feature on this particular shark. Essentially, I'm starting out the same way I did with the mako. I'm thinking of the cylinder cone-like shape of the body, but you can see here the head is actually quite large, quite thick, I should say, and the eye is placed very, very high up, very near the snout. And with that in mind, pulling a nice caudal fin, think about that guy. But with that in mind, with the caudal fin, you see it's huge, the upper lobe of it. And what these sharks do, they actually swim towards fish balls, just a school of fish in a ball. And what they do is they swim towards it, and they actually use their tail as a whip. They thrust it forward and slap the fish ball, and of course stun fish and eat it. They do hunt in coordinated groups, which is really cool. And it also goes to show how much more flexible cartilaginous fish, the shark, is compared to the bony fish, like the ones we were sketching earlier, the catfish and like trout. Just goes to show really how flexible these sharks are. It's very cool to watch. You can see it on YouTube videos, but again, very small lower lobe on that caudal fin. There's a nice lateral line and moving it up into the tail there. Nice big upper lobe. It's really very distinctive feature on the thresher sharks. Also note how large the pectoral fins are and the pelvic fins, especially compared to that mako. Again, built for very different things. The mako is, and the thresher shark here as well. Just form follows function. And sharks, fish, they have a wonderful arrangement of shapes. I'll focus on that head a little bit in my sketch. And remember that gill slit. Don't want to forget those gill slits right there. And just jump around and pull in some hatching and cross hatching for the form. that belly in there. There's that gill slit again. Just thinking about that, of course, moving with the form and then going into the head, pulling some more of that directional mark making. And the eye of the shark, again, very forward on the head. Try sketching that lateral line and clean up the pectoral fin really quick. And I was checking some of my references and noticed that the lower lobe is really small, so I wanted to fix that up on my sketch. Just get that in there and make sure that upper lobe, of course, is nice and big. For the last shark demo, I'm going to go in and sketch a smaller shark. This is a Port Jackson shark. They're also nicknamed horn sharks because they have these distinct little these little noses that look like horns. It's actually quite cute. And these guys have really large pectoral fins, and they can actually kind of scurry along the bottom. So they're living in shallower waters, and they're eating crabs and shellfish like mussels and even sea urchins. Another thing about them, this very distinguishing feature, is the horns. And you'll see there, I was kind of sketching that in, starting to sketch the horn in on the first dorsal fin. And that's another thing. Horn shark, they're also called pig sharks because of their little noses. And yeah, just neat little sharks. Again, I'm doing the same process. They have a very square looking head compared to, say, the thresher and the mako. Not as streamlined. Very different structure for a very different purpose. But I'm still thinking about the skull structure and the difference, the area between the skull and the back of where the muscles begin. And of course the gill slits on this little guy. So that is still all in my head while I'm working on this. Getting that eye in there. Really nice little eye. I'm really a big fan of the eye. They're very interesting. Nice big pectoral fin, like I said before. Get that pelvic fin in there. And think about those gill slits and the skull right there. There is the horn on the first dorsal fin. And these sharks are actually killed for the horn. They're actually used for making jewelry, funny enough. So you can see they're very similar shape. You think of the shape of the carp, bottom feeding fish right here, to the Port Jackson. Very similar. Those gills in there, and that eye. Really want to make sure that eye is nice and clear. Head structure, nice hard skull. Again, a snout that points down. Pulling the second horn, and of course the second dorsal fin on this shark. They'll actually eat purple sea urchins, and their horns will turn purple. Going in, and I'm starting to think about some patterns on this shark. Again, I'm drawing with the form and making sure that when I'm rendering the pattern, it doesn't flatten out my piece. So I draw it first. I think about that nice form design of this shark. Got really organic looking form. So I draw that first and then go in and start shading it. A little bit more, kind of moving back towards the pelvic fin right there. Get that nice cheek area of the shark. You see the eyes are just like the little goby I was sketching. The eyes are actually quite far up on the head too. Then the goby is another one of those fish. It does use, like the shark here, the horn shark here, it does use its little pectoral fins to kind of crawl across the bottom. Very similar actually with the shark and the little goby. Some nice directional mark making a big old pectoral fin. It's really fun to do. And get that nice lateral line in there. I really want to make sure that's nice and clear. Pulling those gill slits. Get that horn in there. A little bit of overlap with the horn in the mouth. So nice and clear. Pulling that pattern. And jump to the back. I don't want to forget about the interesting shape of the caudal fin here. So what I'm going to do is actually just go in very quickly and get a little bit darker dark there and pull in a bit more shading in the pattern on the fish, on the shark. Move that down. You can see how I'm moving with the direction. And then grab a lighter shade, a lighter color, and pull in just those basic shapes of those fins. I thought that'd be interesting, kind of mix it up and push it back a little bit. A lot of definition in the head, and then pushing back less detail in the caudal fin. It's that nice lateral line again, very clear. That nose. Make sure that snout is not flat. Don't want that to be flat. It's got some nice form to it. Pattern right there again. And just jumping back and forth. A little bit of information on the other side. I'm thinking about that pec fin on the other side. And then going in and really defining areas with a nice dark. You'll see there with the eye, it actually has a slit eye. Think of like a goat or a horse. This little guy does. So I zoomed out just so I can see this sketch from a distance, so I don't get caught up in one area and then zoom out and go, ooh, I need to push in more information in other areas. I really want to zoom out to think about the entire thing, so it'll feel finished. The sketch will. There's enough information that communicates what is going on, and I'm not leaving anything out because I don't know it. That's really important with sketching and gathering information about animals and the visual world. A little bit darker on the fins there and into the back. Kind of pushes the eye around the sketch.